2 years ago, we paid over $1,200 for this Isotherm 12-volt fridge. Did we let ourselves get ripped off? If we had bought a residential fridge, we could have saved ourselves over $1,000 for the same capacity. Has the camper industry become like the wedding industry, where the word camper automatically means that you get to tack on a few zeros to the price tag for no obvious reason? In this video, I'm going to review our Isotherm CR130 fridge after having used it for the last 2 years whilst traveling full-time in this van. We're going to try and determine whether all 12-volt fridges are actually a waste of money. And if that's the case, then what should you buy instead? Because there's a lot of numbers in this video, we've created a free comparison guide, and that's going to help you choose the best fridge for your individual setup. Without further ado, welcome to our fridge. Let's look over this fridge and see what $1,200 buys you. According to Isotherm's website, their products are, and I quote, exclusively manufactured using high quality components. But is that actually the truth? This fridge right here is the CR130 model from Isotherm. But the exact same fridge is also sold under the Indel B name. As the model name suggests, this fridge has a 130 litre capacity, which is a great size for extended periods of boondocking. Let's go ahead and open it up. At the bottom of the fridge, we have one large drawer, which according to the manual is probably supposed to be a vegetable drawer, but really there's nothing special about it. So if you want to be a crazy rebel and use it for fruit, I won't judge you. The bottom drawer itself is really nothing special. It's just a kind of cheap piece of flimsy plastic. The top of the drawer is covered by a glass shelf, which, spoiler alert, is kind of the only premium thing about this fridge. Moving up, the rest of the shelves consist of the cheapest metal that I've ever seen in a fridge. As you can probably tell, these shelves are already bent out of shape just from holding some groceries. Now, that's annoying in and of itself. Now, that's annoying in and of itself, but when they get so bent out of shape that they actually fall out from the indentations on the side, if I can kind of demonstrate here, you can see how easy that was. Well, what that means is that you end up with a big pile of collapsed groceries. So if you want to put anything more than a pack of tomatoes on these shelves, good luck. It's not that I'm obsessed with shelves, but there's another thing that drives me absolutely nuts about these specific shelves. And that is this little kind of trap door. Now, I get why they did it. It's so that you can put tall items in there. That's great in theory, but if you put anything even remotely heavy on those trap doors, then this is what happens. Boom, down goes your groceries, and you now have a nice big mess. All right, well, so far, so bad, but maybe the freezer compartment is the redeeming feature of this fridge. Let's take a look. I think not. The cover is really flimsy and has absolutely no seal. It's really just a marginally thicker piece of plastic. There's also definitely no auto defrosting feature on this fridge, so you have to keep a close eye on the freezer compartment or else you're going to end up with one solid block of ice. And as soon as that happens, well, then it starts to spread to the outside of this freezer compartment, and suddenly all you have is an old school ice block fridge. Now, I've been referring to it as a freezer compartment, but I actually think that it's technically referred to as an ice box. Now, that might just be marketing jargon, but I have a suspicion that they use that wording because the compartment doesn't actually freeze that well. If you put frozen ice cream in there, it will keep it frozen enough not to make a mess. But at the risk of sounding like a Viagra ad, the ice cream never gets rock hard. Last but not least, let's take a look at the door. There's nothing really special to note about the door, although I will say that, unlike the rest of the fridge, it actually does keep items contained. So that's a really great benefit. Okay, well, maybe it's not the beauty that's on the inside that counts, but the beauty on the outside. Well, at least if we believe Mean Girls. So let's go ahead and take a look at the outside. The outside of the fridge is covered in a beautiful faux stainless steel gray plastic. Now, my wife was actually surprised when I told her that the door wasn't metal, so maybe the plastic is more convincing than I think. Now, it's not the most scratchable surface, but it's absolutely not as hard wearing as the plastic on a car dash, for example. And you probably can't tell, but we definitely have a few scratches in it already. As with everything on this fridge, it just feels a little bit cheap. Especially when you consider that even budget dishwashers nowadays will have a real stainless steel front. Alright, now, since my wife is Canadian, she insists that I actually say something nice about this fridge. So, I will say that the handle, or latch, is actually really good. I like the fact that it's centered in the middle here and it's not on the top. That means that you can actually have the fridge a little bit more recessed and therefore it doesn't have to stick out into your living space. It also actually does a good job of staying closed, even on bumpy roads. Now the caveat is that you have to listen to the click. If the fridge didn't click, you didn't close it properly. In terms of integrating this fridge into your van, you could pay a few $100s and get a special surround for it, but it's just another piece of plastic and we just made a nice surround out of plywood for a fraction of the price. If you have any questions about the Isotherm fridge or how to plan for and install a 12-volt fridge in your camper, then just let us know in the comments and I will absolutely make sure that I reply to every single one. Now that we've given you the grand tour, let's talk about how well this Isotherm fridge has actually performed. From a strictly functional fridge cooling perspective, it actually does a good job. Well, except for the ever-expanding ice in the freezing compartment and of course the collapsing shelves. Our previous 12-volt fridge was constantly moist and no amount of adjusting the temperature could make up for it. Thankfully, that has not been an issue in this fridge. The compressor is fairly quiet and it doesn't run all the time. In our case, since it's under the bed, we really don't even hear it at all when we're in the main space. Even lying in bed at night, we don't really hear it despite being right on top of it. Although I'm pretty sure that all the layers of mattress and bedding helps. I suspect that if you had this built into your kitchen unit, you would probably hear the compressor a little bit more. In our case, I haven't really noticed any excess heat coming from it, but then again, it's in the garage, so there's tons of airflow around it. If you had this built into a kitchen unit, you would want to make sure that you had a decent clearance to the back of the cupboard, or at least have some ventilation holes so the compressor doesn't get too hot, and that's especially true if you find yourself traveling in hot climates. Now at this point, you might be wondering why on earth we chose this fridge in the first place. Well, it wasn't actually our first choice. Our initial plan was to install a residential fridge, but since it had to fit under our bed, we had a height restriction. After a ton of searching, we determined that we would get the most fridge space by opting for a 12-volt RV fridge. We had a 12-volt fridge from the Swiss brand Vimor in our first van build, but we really weren't impressed with it since, as I mentioned before, we had a ton of moisture issues that we were never able to really fix. This left us to choose between the two big brands in RV fridges, namely Dometic and Isotherm. Choosing between those two brands kinda ended up being a flip of the coin because all the specifications were the same and all the reviews were pretty much the same as well. Would we buy this Isotherm fridge again? In a word, no. There's really nothing special about this fridge, in my opinion, that justifies the exorbitant price tag. All the plastics are cheap and the shelves are so weak that they're likely to collapse if you just whisper the word groceries. The faux stainless steel plastic on the front also feels really cheap for the price. Another example of price cutting that I've actually literally lost blood over is the cage protecting the compressor. The top of the metal wire is razor sharp, and if you're not careful, it'll not only destroy your clothing, but it will also make your arms look as if you tried to enter the next realm. Okay, so the materials for the Isotherm fridge are nothing special, but maybe the power consumption from a 12-volt fridge like this one is so low that it's absolutely worth spending the money on. Well, let's compare it to the power consumption of a residential AC fridge and find out. To help give you the most accurate information possible, there's going to be a lot of numbers in this section. But don't worry about memorizing them. We've created a free comparison guide that you can download. That guide will give you an easy review of all the different models that we're comparing today, along with their power consumption and where to buy them. Let's go ahead and start with the consumption of this specific fridge. According to Isotherm, the average daily consumption of our fridge should be around 418 watts. At 12 volts, that would be roughly 35 amp hours a day. Now, that's honestly a pretty low consumption and should be well within the means of almost any power system, even without any big upgrades. Obviously, that number doesn't mean an awful lot in isolation. So let's go ahead and compare it to this 120 volt fridge, and it's got a pretty similar capacity to our current fridge, so it really should be apples to apples. I've put a link in the description to that fridge. Their fridge consumes around 734 watts a day when using 110 volts. If you were to run that fridge on a 12 volt system, you would be using around 63.5 amp hours per day. And in that number, I've included the efficiency loss from your inverter. That's still not a gigantic power consumption, and it would be within the means of most inverters and batteries. If you're in a country that uses a 230 volt power supply, then this Hisense fridge from Amazon UK is also a great alternative, and once again, I've linked it below. That fridge only uses 246 watts a day on 230 volts. On a 12 volt system, that would be around 21 amp hours per day, and again, that includes the inverter efficiency loss. That's 41% more efficient than this Isotherm fridge, which is almost 6 times the price. That just blows my mind. Now that we have our facts straight about how much power the different types of fridges consume, let's talk about whether that justifies the higher price tag for a 12 volt fridge and what the alternatives are. Let's start off by discussing the options if you're in a country with a 120 volt power supply. The Isotherm fridge that we have clearly uses a lot less power than the fridge that we looked at earlier. But, and this is a huge but, the 120 volt fridge only costs $139, but this Isotherm fridge is $1,200. That's over $1,000 in potential savings. Let me know in the comments if that price difference shocks you, because I am shook, as the kids these days would say. Even if the Isotherm fridge is more efficient, the money you save could easily buy you a brand new 200 amp hour lithium battery and an extra solar panel, and you would still have money left over. That actually kind of sounds like the end of Wheel of Fortune, where they get to choose their price. If you live in a country with a 230 volt power supply, there's even less of a reason to buy a 12 volt fridge. Because of the higher voltage, these fridges are a lot more efficient than their 12 volt counterparts. Even fridges that are designed to run on both 230 volts and 12 volts will actually be more efficient if you run them on 230 volts. Now, you would hope that the build quality of a $1,200 fridge from a quality brand like Isotherm would help make up for the price difference. But from our experience, and as I think you guys saw in the little fridge tour, the build quality is the same, if not worse, than what you would find on a budget residential fridge. Well, at least it is for this Isotherm fridge. The only reason that I would ever recommend that you buy a 12 volt fridge is if you're trying to fit it into a pre-existing space. For example, let's say you're trying to replace a 3-way fridge in an RV, and you can't find a residential fridge that fits in the same cabinet. Now, in that case, it might still be cheaper to buy a 12 volt fridge rather than have someone come out and rebuild your cabinets. But honestly, having said that, if you're a handy person, the cost savings are just so huge that it might still be worth it. At the end of the day, if you're doing your own van conversion, or if you're renovating an older RV, then I would skip the 12 volt or 3-way fridges and plan on installing a residential fridge from the very beginning. No matter what you do, you will save money. And in some cases, you'll even save power so you can actually be off-grid for longer. Another traditional RV product that you should think hard about ditching is the gas cooktop. Switching to an induction cooktop will not only allow you to stay off-grid for longer, but it could also make your camper safer. You can watch our video on the pros and cons of using an induction cooktop in your camper right here.